Well, good morning to all of you. We're back inside for at least this Sunday. We'll see how the weather goes for next week. I want to thank Noah for filling in for me last week. Just did a wonderful job. It's so much going on with his family. I mean, him and Koki are newlyweds, and they've have so many challenges in their first year of marriage, and I talked to him about that, and he just has such a great attitude and spirit about all that, and dealing with the wind last week. Maybe we should have been inside last week as well. I don't know. So thank you so much, Noah, for preaching and teaching on my behalf. We have a special visitor here. Larissa has her boyfriend Jacob with us. And I just say that to embarrass her, one. But it could be worse. I want to tell you a story when Tamara took me to her grandmother's family reunion, little reunion. Her grandmother just didn't know how to introduce me to the family, and so I was introduced, instead as Tamara's boyfriend, I was introduced as Tamara's little friend. And so I'm going to spare you that, Jacob. And so we're glad to have Jacob, Larissa's boyfriend, with us. I'm going to be talking kind of quickly because I got a lot to go over this morning. But as we begin, we're going to talk about the origins of life once again. And we're going to talk about the subject of the Big Bang. You know, as we look at the beginning of the Bible, I want you to think about this in Genesis chapter 1 and in verse 1. Here we have God opening up for the first time, the first words, His revelation of Himself. And as He begins, where does He begin? He begins, we just said the words, in the beginning. And so Genesis chapter 1 and in verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now that's kind of a simple sentence, isn't it? In fact, in English it's only 10 words. But I want to tell you how profound Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is. It answers so many questions. Many questions that what we've been calling the new answer, macroevolution, has trouble answering. Their answer now, today, widely accepted, is the Big Bang. And as I stated before, I want to do this series of lessons to emphasize and give confidence to our belief in a creator, our belief in an intelligent designer, because we're told over and over and over that our side is just a blind faith where there are no facts, there's no evidence, and the other side has it all. And you might be wondering, why is our young people made to feel like that they should be embarrassed of what their parents have taught them? And what they have learned from the church, and more importantly, what they have learned from Word of God. Well, I think there's an answer from God's Word to all of that, and that answer is found in Isaiah 5, verse 20 and 21. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20 and 21, where God through Isaiah says these words, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." And I think in the last year, including now even 2021, we have seen in the forefront of our society, right in front of our face, the circumstances, what happens because that we have leaders and we have people in our country. And we've allowed them to call what is evil good and good evil. And what is sweet bitter and bitter sweet. And so everything has been turned upside down. And why is it that people want to do this? Well, verse 21, woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. And that's a big part of the embarrassment, to make you feel foolish. We're going to throw a bunch of science at you that you can't understand and make you feel like you can't argue this case. But Paul's version of Isaiah 5, 20 and 21 is actually 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 20 and 21, where he writes, where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? And look at this. For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God, God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. I want to read that one section again with emphasis. The world through its wisdom did not come to know God. You can't come to know and have an understanding of God through the wisdom of the world. And that's what our young people are going to be bombarded with and be made to feel foolish that they believe in Jesus Christ and God the Creator, that they believe that this world was all started by an eternal supernatural God. But that's all part of how it works. We live in an upside down world, and where people think that they're wiser than God. And to be a believer in God the Creator, we have to look foolish to the world. That's the way it works. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to talk to you about this question we've been asking over and over, which takes more faith, right? We have this old answer, which is our answer, which has sustained generation after generation a position of faith. And we need to be willing to admit that that's exactly what it is. It is a position of faith. But here's the key point that you need to understand that I want to emphasize to you. It might be a step of faith. And we should not be ashamed to admit that, because that's what it is. But it might be a position of faith. It might be a step of faith, but it's a step of faith, get this, off a mountain of evidence. A Mount Everest of evidence. I don't want to ever hear a Christian say, well, I understand that I believe it because I simply want to believe it. If that's the position of your faith, then you don't have Christian faith. Peter said in Acts chapter 2, verse 37, men of Israel, know for certain that God has made this Jesus Lord in Christ. Know for certain. That's the faith we can have. And so it is a position of faith, but it is a step off a mountain of evidence. But then there is a new answer, as we've talked about before. The new answer has come about because we don't like the old answer. But one of the things that we've asked about the new answer is the new answer based on evidence, or is it based on content? What do you mean by that? Well, it's the new answer because we have just found exciting new evidence that just makes the belief in an intelligent designer a ridiculous belief? No. And I hope you're starting to see this with these lessons. It's based on content. The new answer has come about because we don't like the content of the revelation that tells us in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And so that new answer is telling us that it's a position based on 100% facts and hard evidence. But I hope you have been able to see, as we will this morning, that there's a whole lot of faith, blind faith. They believe in things that science does not show, that science does not prove, and neither can it. But they don't tell you that part. They don't recognize that part. Why is that? Well, it's because of that closed door that we've been talking about before. That what we see in modern day, in this theory of evolution, the new answer versus the old answer, played out itself in the Bible. When Jesus cast out a demon, people wondered, could this be the Messiah? Could this be the Son of God? And the Pharisees were not going to allow that door to be opened. And so they said, Jesus cast out demons by Satan, by Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons. And Jesus goes on to say, that's ridiculous. That's illogical. You have Satan casting out Satan, the devil fighting against the devil. But it made complete sense to them. What else are they going to say? Because they won't open the door to any other possibility. They won't open the door that he did it by the power of God. And that's exactly what we have in the world today. When you begin a discussion, when you begin a debate, and you have already closed the door to one of the possibilities, chances are at some point, at some time, you're going to close the door to the truth. And you're going to be backed into a corner to where you're going to have to believe that which is illogical and ridiculous. I want to talk to you this morning about the danger of starting in the middle. Because that's what evolutionary science usually does. They look at everything and say, well, here it is, it exists, and now let's start from this point and move forward. But let me ask you this. What if you had someone you know, maybe a friend that was a believer in evolution? What if you could get them to go back to the beginning? What if you could get them to talk about the beginning? Well, you would be able to see all kinds of faith. Not facts. Not scientific evidence. You're going to see all kinds of faith for their side. And that says, when I talk to someone that believes in evolution, that's what I tried to do with conversation, with questions. I tried to get them back to the beginning, if nothing else, to see that their position is also a position of faith. They believe things that there's absolutely no scientific evidence for. So let's talk a little bit about the Big Bang and its origin. I don't want to give you too much science. I just want to give you a little bit of this. Basically, before the Big Bang was formulated, scientists basically believe that whatever it took to start everything we see around here, whatever it took to begin the evolution process, was pretty much, the world was static, it was constant, it was eternal, it just was here. But then, in the 1920s, two men began to look at the sky and look at space. And basically, two men are given credit with the Big Bang origin. One is Edwin Hubble, who the Hubble telescope is named in his honor. But basically, Edwin Hubble had a laboratory he worked for not too far from here, up in Pasadena, California, in the 1920s, and he viewed in his 100-inch telescope, one of the most powerful telescopes at that time, he started noticing that some of the things we thought were distant stars were actually galaxies in themselves. And as he looked further, he concluded that these galaxies were moving rapidly away from each other in a universe faster than anyone had ever imagined. In other words, he concluded that space was actually expanding. Space was getting bigger. Well, further studies seem to show that galaxies were moving apart because, as they theorize, things that go out like this must have, you reverse the course, and they must have all come together at one point and started at one point of time from a big explosion. And that's basically what the theory of the Big Bang is. Well, what Hubble did is he started measuring the speed and distances of these galaxies and their movements away from one another. And he concluded that all these galaxies and stars and planets and energy and matter had come from a common point of origin approximately 15 billion years ago. That was around 1929. 2 years earlier, a man by the name of Georges Lemaitre, a Belgian mathematician and astronomer and, get this, Catholic priest, was the first to theorize about the expanding of the universe and to suggest that at some point in time, what he called a primeval atom exploded, forming atoms, stars, and galaxies. Basically, he came up with the theory in 1927, and Hubble, with his work in 1929, basically confirmed his work, his conclusions. The interesting thing is that when the Big Bang theory first came out, scientists didn't want to accept it. Scientists were afraid of it. And you might ask the question, well, why is that? And the answer to that is, think about this. Here comes this new theory that the universe starts at a single time with a single effect and cause. To them, they were afraid because that sounded a lot like Genesis chapter 1. They were afraid if they accepted that would open that door. And so as time went on, scientists added things to the theory, tried to work out some of the problems with the theory, and eventually convinced the scientific world that we could believe in this without bringing God into it. However, what you don't hear, as we've said many times before, that this is a theory, not a fact. But the way it's presented to our young people oftentimes is it's all fact. What is a theory versus what is actual evidence is just blended together, never separated. But there are problems with the theory. There are assumptions that base a lot of their conclusions on. And there are scientists that have been willing to point out, something doesn't work here. What are we going to deal with? Let me give you an example of that. I want to read to you from an article called, from a periodical called Reason and Revelation. And this is from June 1991. And it is written by a scientist by the name of Trevor J. Major. And he is an apologist for God. He is not a believer in the Big Bang. And he brings out this point that scientists who bring up these questions of, there's a problem with the Big Bang theory and it doesn't add up here or doesn't add up there, are basically persecuted by the scientific leaders and community and basically put into Siberia. Scientific Siberia. So he's quoting from a man by the name of Paul J. Steinhardt, and he comments and let me drop down. He writes this: for example, not everyone believes that red shifts should be attributed to the Doppler effect. That's one of the conclusions of the Big Bang theory. Halton Arp, for one, has found enigmatic and disturbing cases where two apparently connected objects show dissimilar redshifts. Many astronomers ignore Arp's work, and he has been denied telescope time for pursuing this line of research. If Arp is correct, then the universe is not expanding, or at least it's not acting in a way consistent with a Big Bang. But that's the world we live in, isn't it? We don't want to open that door. We don't want people to expose the problems that our theories that keep that door closed have. And so what is the Big Bang? Well, basically it starts with this idea that space is getting bigger, the universe is expanding, but as we see, some scientists question that. And therefore it must have had all started at some point in time. But God had no place in it. Well, turn with me, if you would, to the book of Job. We're done with the science part of that. I hope it makes sense to you. Let's talk about God and creation. I told you recently I've been reading through my daily Bible reading, the book of Job. I've finished that part. But it's interesting to me as you look at the end of the book of Job, Job chapter 38. You have this book where Job is arguing with his friends, and his friends are speaking dogmatically about things, and Job is speaking as he holds to his integrity dogmatically about things. And finally, God enters into the story at the very end, and he's a little upset because there's been a lot of things that are spoken dogmatically that simply are not true. And so in Job chapter 38, God begins talking to Job and his friends. And he asks them a question. He asks them over and over, can you? Where were you? Do you know? And then answers those questions, I can, I know, and I was. And it's interesting as God sets out Job and his friends, especially his friends, where does he go to? What does he say? Well, look if you would at chapter 38 and verse 1. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. And he said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now gird up your loins like a man, and I will ask you, and you instruct me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding, who set its measurements? Since you know. Or who stretched the line on it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Or who enclosed the sea with doors? When bursting forth, it went out from the womb. When I made a cloud its garment, the thick darkness its swaddling band, and I placed boundaries on it. I set a bolt in doors. I said, thus far you shall come, but no further. And here shall your proud waves stop. I want you to see in that, where does God go? He goes to the beginning. And he says, you tell me how this happened. Were you there when I set not only this world in existence, but I set it in its function? I gave it its boundaries. I gave it its limitation. He's talking about not only creating the world, but creating what we have labeled nature. And how it functions within that order and within those rules. You tell me. And of course, Job and his friends know they can't do that. God goes back to creation to set things straight. And I'm worried that some scientists who have passed on from this life. Denying the intelligent designer have either had or will have a similar conversation with their Creator. While I was on vacation last week, I was afforded opportunity to watch a movie I've been a long time wanting to watch called Apollo 11. And I got to see it on a widescreen TV with surround sound, and it was awesome. I'm very much in space. Sometimes I'll watch the NASA channel. My family's like, "What are you watching?" And one of the things that stood out to me about Apollo 11, I think you all know, but if you don't, this was the point. This was the space journey where everything that they had been working on for years and years and years culminated to where now they finally were going to put a man on the moon and bring him back. And I kind of laughed, because one of the things you notice about this mission is all the intelligence it took to get a man to the moon and back. I mean, they used some of the best skilled workers to build all the components of the rocket and the various parts of that rocket and the launching pad and then how to land it. They used some of the greatest minds and PhDs to what? Watch all these computers and watch all of the different functions from the takeoff, from the medical, from all of the operational components. There was so much intelligence involved, so many different steps that had to have experts to know exactly what needed to be done and what had to happen and what to do if something went wrong. But then you get to the moon, in which today, including NASA, believes it just is part of this big explosion that formed this satellite called the moon. Despite the fact that it has complexity and uniqueness and organization. It took so much intelligence to get to the moon, but we believe the moon just happened through an explosion. It's ironic humor to me. I laugh at that. But of course, back in those days, NASA didn't quite have the dogmatic evolutionary viewpoint. In fact, 3 missions before that, on Apollo 8, the astronauts of Apollo 8, and let me give you their names here: Bill Anders, Jim Lovell, and Frank Borman. Their mission, very important in getting to the moon, they were the first ones that orbited around the moon. Never had that been done before. And so as these astronauts came around the moon, came around from the dark side of the moon, and they came around, they saw the earth as no human eyes have ever seen the earth. And here's a picture of what they saw. And they were so moved by this first glance of earth from the dark side of the moon, they read for all the world to hear from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 through 10 from the King James Bible. Can you imagine NASA allowing astronauts to do that today? It wouldn't happen, would it? It just wouldn't happen. And so as we bring this lesson to a close, I want to give you quick 3 points that I want our young people to remember. I want you to hold into your memory. I want you to grasp hold of these points. Really, they're these questions. about the great faith it takes to believe in the beginning, which is the Big Bang for them. Number one, question number one, I want you to hold this in your heart and ask, how did the primeval atom, as Lemaitre called it, get there to explode in the first place? In other words, I want you to ask those questions. How did the first, whatever it was, matter, particles, chemicals, whatever it was that exploded, how did it get there in the first place? You see, no one was there to see it. No one could confirm how the first particles of matter came to be there in the first place. And no one can tell you, it's an unanswerable question, what were the first items, particles, chemicals, parts of matter? What were they? You see, science is limited. Science can't go back and experiment and tell you that. They don't know. It's a position of faith. They just believe the right stuff was there. But we're told they have 100% scientific evidence for all they believe. So how did it get there? The first building blocks, the thing that exploded. Number two, I want you to ask this question. What caused the Big Bang in the first place? Science has this theory of cause and effect, right? We have this Harry Potter closet, as now it's been called, under our stairs. And one of the things we keep in this closet is all of our games. And we stack our games up underneath the stairs in this closet. Well, one day, all of a sudden, we're in the house and we hear this crash. And guess what we have? What was that? What happened? What caused that sound? We know that every effect has a cause. Well, it just so happens somebody was walking up the stairs and they hit the right stair at the right place at the right time, and it just sent those games flying down or flying from the pile that they were in. In the fire department, one of the calls we often go on is a fire alarm or smoke alarm call. And when they come in, we don't just stay in the station and say, well, it probably just something happened. No, we have to go there and we have to investigate. Because what? We want to find out what's the cause. What caused this fire alarm to go off? Is it something that we need to be concerned about? Well, you know what? Evolution's answer to the Big Bang. What caused it? The Big Bang is the effect. What caused it? Their answer is nothing. Nothing caused it. It just happened. When we say that they believe that all that came around, all we see today, something came from, that's what we're talking about. All of a sudden, bang, it was there. What caused it? Nothing. Could it be that answer is a little bit like Jesus casting out demons by Beelzebub? Could it be that seems so logical to them because they want to keep that door closed? Remember, scientists at first were worried Big Bang is going to lead to God. Is it the answer that just they have to say? So I want you to ask those questions. What were those building products? How did they get there? Number two, what caused the Big Bang in the first place? And number three, how can explosion create stars and planets and atoms? All that have design, organization, complexity, all that work in well-organized orbits. Especially the Earth, that just so happens to be in the right rotation and the right angle, the right everything, position-wise, from the sun. And we haven't even talked about the sun. How did it get there? I have been lucky. I've never really been part of an explosion. Other than maybe someone throwing a water balloon that hits the ground or hits me. But what do explosions do? They send particles all over the place. And eventually, what? They come to rest. And it's a mess. It's chaos. It's disorganization. But we are led to believe that this explosion happened. And it created the earth in just the right place to sustain life. And it created the moon. It created the sun. And all these planets and all these galaxies. And we're the ones made to feel foolish. These are positions of faith. Blind faith. Science can't answer these questions. It's like Jesus casting out demons by Beelzebub. There's a danger of starting in the middle. And that danger is you don't see how much faith it takes to get there. Can I say that again? The danger of starting in the middle is you don't see how much faith it takes to get there. I believe that's why we're seeing people say evolution has all the facts. They really haven't gone to the beginning. Did the Big Bang ever happen? I don't know. But one thing I can tell you, it didn't happen without God. And that's the great thing about a Christian and believer in God. God doesn't start us in the middle. Doesn't just say, here you are, now go on with your life. He starts us at one. In the beginning, God created the heavens. There's the effect, and there's the cause. Thank you so much. We're going to now get into our song service. But I hope you have confidence. Young people have confidence that your belief in God the Creator is built on a mountain of evidence. Thank you so much.